Spring. So in this session we are going to see inner bean. So in Java, inner classes are defined within the scope of another Java class. Similarly, Spring, a bean which is defined within the scope of another bean, we call it as the inner bean. So it should be defined within the property element or constructor arg element. So in this session we are going to see inner bean. So in Java inner classes are defined within the scope of another Java class. Similarly, inner bean, a bean which is defined within the scope of another bean, we call it as the inner bean. So that's a bean which is defined within the property element or constructor arg element, we call it as the inner bean. Right, let's see an application. So already I have created an application named IB. So in this in the previous session we have seen a dependency injection, setter based dependency injection. So in that application we do have three Java classes. One is main app, spell checker, and the text editor. Spell checker is dependent on text editor. The same stuff it applies to this application, and we do have one more file, beans.xml file. This file alone it gets varied. Alright, so this file alone we are going to do some other code snippet. Okay, so let's so already I have created main application, main app dot class, the same code snippet that were written in the previous session. That is, in the previous session we have seen setter based dependency injection. The same it applies here. Okay, so I have created the abstract application context, and then the text editor object is created for the text editor, and then with that object I have called the method spell check in the text editor. Same way, spell checker class is created, and constructor exists in this class, and we do have one more method, check spelling. Same code. Okay, and then text editor we create the spell checker reference variable, and then setter getter method, that is set sc and get sc. We create the setter getter method for the spell checker reference variable sc, and then one more method, spell check. So in this method we call the check spelling method of spell checker class. Okay, so that's it. Let's move to the beans.xml file. Here what we do, so we need to define two bean. Alright, so how do we define? First, okay, let me remove this so that it would be easy. See, how do we text editor? For this text editor, it resides in com.demo.text editor. Okay, and for this, so that class name should be given in the class attribute. So that's been given, and then move on. Text editor object, just give any name, text txt. That text editor object should exist in the id attribute. Okay, and then text editor does have reference variable, spell checker reference variable. You can go here, text editor class is here. It does have spell checker reference variable sc, so that should be initialized, right? So that initialization will happen with the help of property element. Okay, so that sc should be assigned to the name attribute. All right, so here we don't need to give any ref. We don't need to pass in the value. We're using the ref attribute. Okay, and Now one more now the inner bean spell checker bean should be initialized, right? So spell checker bean is the we are going to initialize, we are going to define the spell checker bean should be defined. So we are going to define the spell checker bean as the inner bean. So how do we define? This is a property element. So inner bean is nothing but a bean which is defined within the scope of another bean, right? So text editor is a bean, and we are going to define spell checker bean within the scope of text editor bean. So that the spell checker bean should be defined within the property. Thus text editor that the spell checker bean should be defined within the property element. Okay, so here you can see the the inner bean should be defined within the scope of another bean. Here text editor is a bean, and spell checker is will be the inner bean. So how do we define the inner bean? Spell checker, it should be defined within the text editor, right? So where do we define the spell checker? Defined in the text editor inside the property tag. So inner bean should be defined within the property element or constructor arg element. Here we do have property element, so within this we need to define the spell checker. So yeah, again bean and then id. Okay, two attributes, one is bean and the id. So here spell checker resides in the com.demo.spell checker. Okay, and for this spell checker class name is given in the class attribute, and then for this spell checker object is I just give spell checker. Okay, this name should be object name should be given in the id attribute. Okay, that's it. So we have defined the inner bean spell checker, okay, within the bean text editor. All right, so that's it. So this is the way we define the inner bean in a Spring application. Okay, so let me run this. Let's see beans.xml. The spell checker class name should be is given, but spell checker the name of the class is S and C should be in caps. Now I changed it. I have it's been given spell checker, the right name is given. All right, so let me run now. See in the console underneath you can see the output spell checker constructor and then text editor. Initially the spell checker is initialized, okay, and then the control comes to the text editor setter method. Yes, text editor class setter method is called text editor set sc, and then the sc spell checker reference variable sc is initialized. Okay, and then in the main app text editor spell check from being in the main app Java class, text editor class spell check method is called. Okay, so and then the control goes to the text editor spell check method, and then from there within the spell check method in turn we call spell checker class check spelling method. So that method is called. Okay, and then in that method we print the text. All right, so that's it. So in this way the control goes. So in this session we have seen how to define what is inner bean and how to define an inner bean in a Spring application. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.